Welcome to Inside Winnipeg Politics. I'm Kevin Klein, joined by two Winnipeg Sun columnists, Jeff Currier and Royce Koop, who is also a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba. We want to talk today about a Winnipeg Sun poll that was done just before the new year. And the question was, do you feel Manitoba needs a new conservative party? Now let's look at what happened at the Progressive Conservative Party. I was a member of it. It was a terrible, terrible campaign. I mean, we failed miserably and lost for good reason. But if you look at the leadership race before that, and you looked at how close that was, and it went to court, and all the questions that came about, and many people that I still talk to today that never got a ballot, they didn't get a chance to have their vote counted. All kinds of controversy about that. And then we find out after the election that the Conservatives, had an invoice from a sex coach, if you will, for a car rental that nobody took accountability for. There was also invoices over $300,000 from a company in Alberta and one here in Manitoba for data collection. It was a mess. It was a mess, and it wasn't a fiscal conservative. So we asked the question, and almost 1,000 people voted, and about 75% of those, roughly, said it's time for a new conservative party. So I want to throw that at you, Jeff. Is it time for a new Manitoba Conservative Party?
Well, it's time for a Manitoba Conservative Party for sure. Now, whether the current progressive conservatives can fill the bill, I think your skepticism is pretty obvious, and the part of the folks who took part in our poll as well, because I think it's become apparent that this party has not been well run for some time, and so if it's going to be the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba that represents that swath of political opinion, there's going to have to be a pretty serious house cleaning. If that's not going to happen, then maybe it does require a new political party. The unfortunate part of that, of course, is that you wind up doing some vote splitting, and you hand the reins of government over to the current provincial government for an even longer period of time, potentially. But if you and it's about leadership and organization, as we all know, guys, it's really about leadership. And we've talked about Justin Trudeau at the federal level. The federal Liberals are in dire straits because of leadership. And if you have the right leader, then a new party can maybe coalesce some of that conservative vote. Let's remember that in the last provincial election, people who had never voted anything but conservative their entire lives in Manitoba voted for the NDP because they were so dissatisfied with the performance of their own party. It was unheard of. It was almost inconceivable. Talked to some of the fundraisers in the party, and they were having difficulty raising money from people who had always given money to the party. And so that's a sign that you've lost some of your base.
Well, we have factual information that the party is in debt, in deep debt. They're still trying to get out of that. The people that were involved in the last brutal campaign, not all of them, but many of them are working on Avi Khan's leadership, for example. And you've got a leadership race right now that seems to be longer than the Tour de France, because it's going to take months and months and months and months, and there's no energy around it. We're not seeing any evidence that there's a fiscal conservative involved. We need to know. I think conservatives need to know we're going to start tackling these problems. But Royce, I mean, you would know probably by teaching this to your students that has been some success in Canada when parties do separate and go their own ways and reform. And I think we've seen that in other provinces.
Yeah, yeah. So when people say in a poll that we need a new conservative party, the question to me is, does this just reflect a real dissatisfaction with the party that'll kind of, eventually they'll come around, they'll just come back and vote for the party, or does it reflect an actual kind of willingness to embrace a new kind of politics, a new party? And one of the problems for the PCs is that in other provinces, in our Western neighbor provinces, we actually have seen right-wing parties split, new right-wing parties created. and basically transforming politics in Saskatchewan and Alberta and BC. And in BC, we saw this very recently. We had a kind of center-right party. The BC Liberals became BC United, fell apart, and were replaced by the BC Conservative Party, which is actually a pretty consistently conservative party, very principled on fiscal issues, on social issues, and they came within a whisker of winning this last BC election. So, if I'm the leader of an older conservative party like the PCs, I'd be concerned about this. I'd be concerned about making sure that traditional supporters of the party feel like they're at home in the party, like the leadership of the party is willing to water its own garden. Federal Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre is very good at this, very good at speaking to the base, making sure that people feel welcome, making sure that conservatives feel like they have a place. PCs, I think maybe there is some room for improvement here, and we'll see in this leadership race. Still, as you mentioned, a lot of time left. We'll see if that happens.
But don't you think that when you have such an issue like the invoicing and election spending problems that have come out, I mean, you not only lose touch with your base from that, but you lose credibility as a party. When you don't have anybody from the party that comes out, from the party president to the president who operates the party and has for several years now, to the board members that have been around for a long time, none of them coming out to apologize.
Yeah, okay. I think the general public probably forgets about stories like that, but your party membership doesn't. The people who buy the party memberships don't. And to Royce's point about making sure the base is solid, the base isn't as solid as it once was. Now, we understand in Manitoba, you have to win the city of Winnipeg if you're going to win power. But you want to make sure that those people who fork out their $15 to buy the membership are going to be satisfied that their $15 is going to the right place. And I think those kinds of stories, the invoicing stories, they'll resonate with those folks more so than somebody in the city of Winnipeg who doesn't pay real close attention to politics. But yeah, this is a party that has to reinvent itself, and it's got to have somebody at the helm who is going to be able to reattract some of those disaffected Tory voters from the last election, and to say, you know what, we can provide a reasonable alternative to the NDP, and so you don't have to live with the NDP for 8 to 12 or 16 years. That we can rebuild this thing, and we can get you back on the right track here, folks. And right now, I'm not sure who that would be.
Well, right now we're almost out of time, but I mean, right now we're not seeing a lot of party memberships. Sources are telling us there's only a few thousand memberships that have been sold for the party. And when you're in a leadership race, to have that few memberships sold, that identifies a really, really big problem. I think that we have to be honest about moving forward. Is that the way that these campaigns are now run, where you don't have to really live in the country. You have to have a house here, I guess, an address, but you don't have to be Canadian. You don't have to be qualified to vote. I think you can be 14 to buy a membership. These races are becoming, I don't want to say infiltrated. It's a bad word, Royce, but I think you know what I'm talking about. You can get people coming into the party to bring up one person to lead that party that might necessarily not align with the conservative values that the traditional party members would.
Oh, well, it can definitely happen. I mean, a great way to win party nomination in Canada or to win party leadership is to bring new people into the party. And the views of those people might not align well with kind of old members, old line at party activists. And so that can certainly happen. That's a great way to hurt a party as well. If you don't tend to old members, the kind of people that Jeff was talking about that actually fork over money that support the party in the long term. I mean, there's no doubt the PCs are in a valley right now. The things you mentioned, the fact that they lost that tuxedo by-election, In terms of rebuilding, it's really hard to talk about that until the leadership is out of the way. Jeff emphasizes leadership, how important this is. It's the most important thing. And so the party needs to get through this leadership race and then work with what they have. It needs to appeal to suburban Winnipeggers. That's where elections are going to be fought and won in Winnipeg moving forward. But before we can get to those discussions, I think the leadership question needs to be decided.